and going live. So I can see participants are starting to come in. So if you're joining us now, we're just about to start our community conversation on post-secondary back to school. Just give us a minute to get online on our Facebook page. And if you have questions, if you're watching through Zoom, questions or comments, you can put them into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We've got 3 guest panelists joining me today, and we're going to go through sort of a conversation on what the impacts of COVID have been on them and what the year ahead looks like, most importantly. So I'm just connecting to Facebook right now, putting in a little title. And going live. Okay, so again, we have people joining us, a couple of participants, and we'll mostly be live on Facebook, which we are now. So again, welcome to everybody. My name is Ihor Michalchyshyn. I'm the Executive Director of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress. I'm located here in our office in Ottawa. With me are a number of panelists who I'm going to introduce in a moment. This is the next in our series of community conversations on the impacts of COVID-19, a program that's supported by the Canadian Red Cross and the Government of Canada, which has allowed us to have many interesting conversations with groups of Ukrainian Canadians across Canada of various sectors. We had a back to school conversation 2 weeks ago with our Ukrainian Canadian teachers, and that was very well received, lots of positive feedback. So we thought it would be important, obviously, to also talk about the impact on post-secondary campuses and post-secondary students, most importantly. So with us tonight are 3 guests who will talk about their own experience and the experience of their cohort, their students that they're working with, and the impact on their education. So I'm not sure where they are on everybody's screen, but below me, underneath me is here Devon, Sereda, Goldie. Top left corner on my screen is Irina, Boyko, and then of course Marc, Darmohraj. So welcome to all of you. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about themselves, what they're studying, where they're studying, and then we'll get into our conversations. So we'll start with Devon.
Viviet, hello. So my name is Devon, and I am a Master of Arts candidate at the University of Victoria in British Columbia, although I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta. And I also serve as the Vice President National for SUSK and the President of our local Cook branch in Victoria. And I'm studying applied theater and Ukrainian studies, and I'm looking at how theater can be used as a tool to address intergenerational trauma within the Ukrainian community and hopefully be used to generate healing and intergenerational conversation.
Excellent, very interesting. Thanks, Devon. Irina.
Hi everyone, I'm Irina. I am in my final year of my economics degree here at the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg. I am serving as VP Finance on the SUSK board this year, and I'm also the president of my USO here in Winnipeg at the University of Manitoba. So that's a little bit about me.
Excellent, thanks Irina. And Marc.
Hi, my name is Marc. I study at McGill University. I'm also in my 4th year of my economics degree. I've been involved with the USO there this is my 3rd year involved on the exec level, and I am serving as vice president this year. I'm also vice president East on the SUSK board, so basically just communicating with the Eastern USOs in Canada. And this is my 2nd year on the SUSK board.
Great. So you've heard a couple of abbreviations. I actually was going to ask Devon if you can tell us a little bit about SUSK and what that is, and also when USO in terms of some of our listeners or viewers who may not be familiar with those terms.
Absolutely, happy to. So SUSK is the Ukrainian Canadian Students Union. SUSK is the acronym for our Ukrainian name. And USO stands for University Student Organization. So those are usually clubs or student societies or associations at various universities across the country. We have over 25 USOs at the moment at various universities.
Excellent. Thanks for that explanation. And again, we're very glad to be partnering with SUSK tonight to bring you this presentation. And thank you guys for your involvement. So we wanted to start off the conversation, not to dwell on it too much, but to talk a little bit about March and sort of, what happened when you as university students were going to class. It was, I think, towards the end of that semester. So let's start with Marc, and then we'll go to Irina and then to Devon. What was it like? How did you get the news? What happened to your classes and your life as a student in March?
March was tough. It all kind of happened very quickly, as I'm sure everybody can relate to, not just students. So it was probably little more than a week from going to something that was kind of on the news, not extremely relevant to our lives, to having classes canceled and not really knowing what the future was going to be. And so as a student, it's kind of tough navigating that sort of environment, not knowing what classes are going to be like, if they're going to be online, if you're going to come back. And then once you get to a more organizational level, like related to the student clubs, it gets even more complicated, especially when you have been organizing events that are supposed to be happening in the next week or two, and now you're being told that you can't host those events. So it was definitely tough. It's definitely tough, but we've had time to adapt and kind of come up with strategies since then. But yeah, March was not easy.
And Irina, how was your March in spring?
Well, class-wise, about a week or two before everything kind of went into lockdown and everyone staying home, because I'm an economics student, that's kind of what we ended up talking about in our last few classes in class is what's going to happen in the next couple weeks. Like, are we going to have class? What's happening and stuff like that. So it was kind of interesting to have that conversation in class with my professor in our small class at that point. And then everything in the span of like a week or two, everything fully got moved online. And it was definitely different, especially as a student who personally doesn't take online classes. It was definitely a shift. And especially with university having such a big social aspect, it was kind of tough transitioning from seeing people and having conversation with classmates and friends and stuff like that to being at home and not seeing anybody and stuff like that. So it was definitely tough making that transition, and especially on Ukrainian student group level, it was coming up to Easter, and our student group had some events and plans those like couple weeks before Easter for our pisamke workshops or paska baking and stuff like that. So it's kind of tough that we were essentially done planning those events and we were just about to advertise them and having to cancel them because it was no longer possible to do that. So it was definitely a shift. And on a student group level, now we're kind of trying to navigate on how to do virtual events. And maybe as hopefully COVID is now slowing down and things are opening up, maybe we can start having smaller get-togethers again. But at this point, it's just trying to navigate on making that transition and trying to get students engaged.
Excellent. And we want to welcome all of our viewers on Facebook. There's about 30 people watching last time that I was on there, clicking between. Devon, can you tell us what was your spring like? How did your semester end?
It was chaotic, to say the least. As somebody who is in the arts and in theater particularly, which is such an inherently in-person experience, it was a big challenge for us. And for me especially, I was in the middle of doing my arts-based research project. So I had spent the past 2 months creating, writing, developing a play about the Ukrainian Canadian story and immigration, and it was set to go up in 2 weeks. And I was working with my supervisor. I was his teaching assistant, and we were in class one day, and he said, I hear the university might be closing. And then the very next day it was shut. So I was doing a lot of running around trying to figure out, is it still logistically possible for me to hold rehearsals? Is it still even possible to do a play, to do a show? And very quickly realized that it was not. And trying to figure out how to move forward with my research and figure out how I was going to finish my work was very challenging. And also for our classes, it was very difficult to figure out how do you, for example, mark an acting assignment or a directing assignment when everything's moved online. It was a big challenge. And for our Ukrainian Students Club, we were just in the midst of doing our annual pierogi sale. So we'd spent a bunch of the month of February on weekends at the local Ukrainian church pinching pierogis, and we're just about set to have our pierogi sale, which we usually do in person, and had to figure out how to work around that. So we ended up doing deliveries to people's house, which was quite fun. It took some work logistically, but it ended up being a good experience.
And so, Devon, maybe tell us what's been the impact. What was the impact on SUSK sort of nationally in terms of the plans that you had for the spring?
Absolutely. So every May, usually the first weekend, we hold our annual Congress, which is when representatives from all of our clubs across the country come together, and we hold our annual elections for our board of directors, our annual general meeting. We usually do a bunch of really great interactive workshops, experiences. And so our annual Congress was planned completely and scheduled to take place in Toronto. And, you know, we had the website launched and everything. People had started to register, and we had to make a really difficult decision about how we were going to move forward. We decided to postpone originally, and we were very hopeful that we could have a delayed Congress in August, which was our original plan. So we had those conversations with vendors and speakers. But of course, as you know, that didn't end up being a feasible option either. The pandemic continued, so we opted to move to an online format, which was a whole new ballpark for all of us. So we had to work together to figure out how we were going to do those pieces that are so critical to Congress, things like elections and the AGM, and how we were going to do that virtually and ensure that all the participants had a voice. So it was challenging. And we ended up hosting our Congress over Zoom and also streaming it live to Facebook, just like we're doing right now. And it ended up working out really well. We had an online social as part of it. And as much as it wasn't, you know, the wonderful community experience that we've come to know and love, it was really wonderful to be able to, even just in an online format, gather together and see each other virtually. And we all shared some beverages afterwards and played some online games. So it was a challenging experience for us, but overall it worked out. And I think it was a good experience for everyone who participated.
Excellent. So, Marc, what's been the impact? What happened to the sort of the life of the student club where you are active over the spring and summer? What have you guys also moved to an online format, or have things kind of been on hold until now? Oh, you're on mute, Marc. We can't hear you.
My bad. I would say that, you know, directly following the pandemic, we were pretty much on hold. I think that the transition to online classes before the semester end made it really challenging to kind of try and you know, brainstorm new events in such a strange and new environment. But then after classes end and kind of summer came into session, a lot of people were stuck at home. We started taking advantage of the time that we had. We didn't have any formal events over the summer or yeah, so far like early fall, but we have been trying to maintain our presence on social media and trying to engage new members for the semester and the year that lies ahead.
Excellent. And Irina, how about in Winnipeg at U of M? What was the impact? Anything different that you guys had to do over the spring and summer, or was it everything canceled?
So we kind of put everything on hold until the fall, because we usually do our elections for our new exec in the spring, right before the end of school. But we decided to put that on hold until the fall term, hoping that everything would ideally resolve itself by that point. Obviously, that's not the case. So now we're starting back up again, being more active on social media, and we're actually, our applications for our new executive for this coming year are out. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll be posting about who our new exec is.
Excellent. Okay, so now we've heard from each of you about that. And again, we invite any of our guests that have comments or our viewers that have comments on Facebook or on Zoom to type them up and we can take a look at that. But I wanted to talk about the year ahead, because I think that's been sort of the new reality facing all of us, that even myself as a part-time mature student returning at the University of Ottawa, there's a lot of new technology that the profs and the students are learning. I mean, a lot of things have already been online, which is great, but I think, you know, the adaptation continues in terms of the institutions and the individuals. So I wanted to hear from you about sort of the impact on yourself, and then also sort of on your campus, maybe generally. I think I don't think there's any campuses that I've heard that are doing in-person classes. I know there's some instances where there's labs where that can't be replaced in terms of that learning. But we'll start again with Devon and go to Marc and go to Irina. What's been the impact on your campus, Devon, on your studies, and then sort of what are you seeing and hearing in your community?
The technology, as you mentioned, has been a really big thing. There's been a lot of shifts and changes. And as a teaching assistant, as a graduate student, I've kind of seen both sides, both from the student side of things and the teaching faculty side of things. I would say that our university, the University of Victoria, has done a really impeccable job of making sure that there's education available for, you know, educators and for students about the new technology. But at the same time, the technology's been changing so quickly. So for example, the University of Victoria offered an online course for teaching assistants to learn how to TA online, which I took. And at that time, it was about partly the Course Spaces online learning module program. And by the time the fall semester came around, they decided to do an entirely different program called Brightspace. So I'd taken this course to learn how to use the one operating program, only to have to take a second course to learn how to use this other program. So that's been challenging, having to learn different programs. And like you said, almost everything is online. I think there are a few labs that are in person, but all of the courses that I'm taking and I'm TAing are online, and just trying to figure out how to access what you need is very difficult. You know, the information, for example, is probably on the website, but where on the website, especially when it's a brand new operating system you've never used before, can be very challenging. And I've heard through the grapevine from a few of the professors that I work with that, at least at our university, they're anticipating that next fall will also be online. They're looking that far in advance and saying that they're not anticipating that we're going to be back in person for more than a year. Wow. Which is a little scary, but, you know, at least it's good to know now, so we can work on focusing on fixing the online learning systems that we're using.
Okay, well, that is interesting to be thinking already about the next fall. Marc, what about yourself? What's your fall looking like, and what does fall look like at your campus generally?
So for me individually, I think that the hardest part of transitioning to online learning has been the inconsistency. And so all of the professors are doing their best to deliver the material as efficiently as possible and to make the learning experience as good as possible for all their students. but all the professors are kind of taking their own approach when it comes to how they are doing that. So some professors are very hands-off. They record their lectures and they post them online, and it's pretty much no social interaction at all, just kind of almost watching YouTube videos and taking notes on it. And then other classes are very engaged, heavy participation, and participating can be pretty hard with the technical challenges and stuff as well. But neither approach is really better than the other, in my opinion. It's just we're already on week 3, and I haven't exactly settled into a routine yet, just because it's hard to find what works in such a new environment. But I'm hoping that, you know, within the next coming weeks, it starts to make more sense and the pieces start to fit together. But that's kind of my own personal experience with it.
How about on your campus? What's happening at the campus that you're at?
So as far as I know, at least at the undergraduate level, everything is online. There might be some labs that are happening in person, but not that I'm aware of at the undergraduate level. I think for grad students, like people doing research, they're going in to campus, but I think as far as I know, that's it.
Okay. Oh, and I see we have one comment and question, which we'll get to after we talk to Irina, and it's actually a very good one. So Irina, what about the impact on yourself this fall? What is it looking like for you and at your campus?
So like Devon and Marc said, it's definitely different having everything online. I know at the U of M, there have been some technological issues, and the fact that with so many students being online all at the same time, using the online platform with either Zoom or WebEx, the program has gotten so slow that you think it would only take a couple minutes to get to a class or get into the Zoom or video lecture, and it's been taking like 15 minutes, half an hour, that you're like, oh, I have 5 minutes to get to class. Just kidding, nothing's loading, and then you end up being late to class, which is really frustrating, especially when there's like tens of thousands of students all on the same site and you're trying to get into class, and you have to kind of anticipate for that slow system, which isn't
You're at the mercy of the server.
Yeah, hopefully in the next couple of weeks that'll get resolved, because obviously this is new to everyone and you can't anticipate for everything. As for on campus, that's obviously a little different. I personally haven't been on campus since March, since my last class. So not too sure what's going on there. I know, if I'm not mistaken, our campus is open now, but if you do go, it's mandatory masks no matter where you go if you're inside. I don't think anything else is really open, but I'm not too sure about that. But it's definitely tough not necessarily being able to go to school as easily, because I know a lot of people love having that set workspace, because not everyone can study at home. And now with COVID, it's a little tougher to do that.
Great answers, great information from all of you. We have a kind of a question comment from Nastya, who worked for us and for SUSK last summer. So, and I think she's the president of the U of O Student Club. So that's great. So her comment question is, what's your advice for students on continuing to stay active in the local Ukrainian community without being on their computer 24/7? Because as we know, classes and work already involve being on the screen a lot, most of the day. What are ways for people to stay involved in fun activities without prolonging sort of this, making it all screen time? So we'll start with Devon, Marc, and then Irina, if you have any advice. And I think also sort of maybe we can sort of extend this to talk about sort of getting involved in the local sort of student clubs and sort of what are the things student clubs can do? What can they do? What are they thinking about doing to adapt to the COVID parameters in terms of their activities and staying connected? So we'll start with Devon and then we'll go around again. So Devon, what are your thoughts on that question and comment?
That's a really, really good question, especially because, yeah, screen fatigue is such a thing these days. I think that depending on where you are and how safe your particular group of students feels with potentially doing social distance in-person gatherings, that is something that you can look at, especially if you're looking at doing an outdoor event, say a gathering at a park where everyone is social distancing and wearing masks. I think that is something that can be considered, but again, you really have to make the decision on where is your university located, how active are the COVID cases in your area, and do your members feel safe looking at that option? It could be a really great option if you feel safe, but you have to make that decision based on your own sense of safety and risk. I would also really encourage looking at online event options. I absolutely hear you about the screen fatigue. It is so real, but there are a lot of really fun things that we can do together online, all sorts of different games that we can play together, various different screen sharing and watching opportunities, things like watching Netflix movies together, things along those lines. And you might be able to look into some volunteering opportunities in your local community. That's one thing our club is doing at the University of Victoria. Our local cultural center has a library that they're working on digitizing. So we have scheduled a volunteer day where a small group of us is going to go in, make sure we're completely socially distanced, and work on cataloging those books into the online system. So we'll get to be together in a space, socially distanced, safely, but we'll get to chat and see each other while also contributing to something meaningful in the community. So that might be something that you can think about as well.
That's a great idea. Marc, any advice or comments on this question for students about staying involved in the local community and their student groups?
It's a really tough question, especially given that once the weather starts getting much colder, it's really hard to hold events outside. I mean, it's not impossible, but it kind of becomes less of an option. And so, I mean, I know that for the time being, the Ukrainian student organizations in Montreal have been talking about doing some events kind of at a distance, at a park, outdoors, to make sure it's as safe as possible. As we get closer to winter or later in fall, it does become a lot more difficult. And so SUSK is kind of working together to come up with strategies and come up with ways to help the USOs come up with events that will sort of come up with events that can sort of fit within the guidelines of the situation and what is safe for everybody involved. And so we will be definitely in touch with all the USOs to make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page and that everyone can kind of help each other navigate. But it is a very good question and it is a tough one. And it requires a lot of thinking for sure.
Excellent. And Irina, any thoughts on this one in terms of recommendations for staying involved and active?
Yeah, so Devon and Marc covered quite a bit, but I will add in some stuff. So I know that, I mean, even though we are younger, we tend to be on our phones a lot, but even that does get exhausting sometimes. So you don't necessarily have to be on your phone 24/7 to stay up to date. You can always get just notifications about, oh, what has this group posted? Or, oh, does this group send emails? And that's kind of how you can stay up to date with notifications and emails rather than constantly scrolling through random stuff all day long, because that does get exhausting. As for events and stuff like that, like Devon said, it really depends on your location and how comfortable your USO and community feels with getting together in person. I know Winnipeg has lower amounts of cases than maybe some of the other provinces, but it's still pretty risky. But you can do smaller events, and even when the colder weather comes, I know not everyone wants to be outside, but there are a lot of opportunities to get together and be social. And if it is cold like it is in Winnipeg, you're going to have your face covered anyway. So I know at the online congress we actually did talk about a few different ideas of what USOs can do. And one of the ideas was actually pumpkin carving, which is coming, I guess, closer to Halloween. And that's something that's pretty easy to do and at a distance as well. You can grab a pumpkin, go to a park, either sit on the ground or sit at a picnic table, all fairly social distancing, and it's a fun activity that you can do. And if you're worried about numbers or who's going to show up, you can always mention that it's like a pre-registered thing so that you know how many people are coming and to kind of limit who the number of people that can come.
Yeah.
Plus, you can always go to haunted houses again, depending on numbers, because I know all of the ones in Winnipeg and surrounding areas, they're all outside. So it's more of a haunted forest, or come winter, there's always ice skating. And there's a lot of things that you can do even if the weather does get cold. Not to mention, you can always do different events online, whether that's movie night, whether that's a game night, whether it's trivia, or just getting together to talk and catch up. So there's always lots of options out there, and it's just kind of navigating as to what works best.
Excellent. So I want to, I mean, we've I think had a good conversation. I wanted to touch upon something that I don't want to put anybody in a spot, but I think that the message we're hearing in the media right now this week is that, you know, younger people between ages of 20 and 40 are the most, I think they're the fastest growing demographic in terms of the COVID transmission. There's been a lot of media attention paid to American campuses, particularly where they're reopening and people aren't, well, they're not doing online classes necessarily in the way that you guys are. And so there's people getting together and, you know, COVID is spreading. So not to put anybody on the spot, but I mean, how are you guys feeling? It seems like you're taking it seriously. SUSK is taking it seriously. You're doing everything, you're thinking about doing things in a safe manner. Are you seeing amongst your, peers, it doesn't, some of you haven't been at campuses, but are you seeing signs of concern among your sort of age group or cohort, or is that something that are you seeing people be more responsible than the media coverage might be? Anybody want to comment on that?
I would say that I've seen both. On, things like Instagram and social media, especially, I've seen lots of photos and stories, and I can see that there's some young people who really are taking it seriously, are really diligent about wearing masks. There's lots of young people who are using masks as the new fashion accessory, which I love, and really trying to be mindful of social distancing. But on the other side, I have definitely seen some young people who are perhaps not taking it as seriously as they should. I tend to feel concerned when I see groups of people who aren't living together, posing for pictures together, not wearing masks. That makes me feel uncomfortable. But of course, everybody has to make their own risk assessment, and it's hard to say, but I would say that I have definitely seen both. So it's hard to say if it's better or worse in any location, but I definitely do get the sense that there are people who perhaps aren't taking it as seriously as they should.
Irina or Marc, any thoughts on that?
I would say it's really dependent on person by person. I wouldn't really narrow it down to a certain age group or not. I mean, maybe you can say that younger people will say are a little more reckless, but that's obviously not speaking for everyone, because I feel that we're doing our job to stay more careful and cautious about who we're hanging out with and where we're going and stuff like that. So I think it really depends on the person, how they feel about it, because obviously some people are don't want to be tied down and stay at home and wait for this to blow over. They want to enjoy their life. Unfortunately, that comes at a cost for some other people, but you can't always win. And
yeah. Well, no, again, kudos to for the work that you're doing yourselves and your student clubs. It sounds like you're putting a lot of thought into doing things safely and sort of following the rules. And again, as Devon said, we don't really know sort of what the year ahead will be, if it's half a semester, a whole year, or longer. Before we wrap up, again, thank you for the great conversation. Is there any other final thoughts or recommendations or kind of reflections that you've had on sort of the experience or sort of the experience you're going to have going forward? Anybody have any kind of words of wisdom or kind of smart tips or any kind of things that they'll be watching for?
I think I would really just try to encourage students to try not to get frustrated and to try your best to stick it out. It's really going to be challenging. You know, we've got all of these technological difficulties, plus the fact that we're not in person. And I think with online courses, it is really easy to want to tune out. But I really encourage you to, you know, put your strongest effort in and find ways to make it work for you. One thing that I think can help a lot is finding time to meet with a couple of your peers in the class to chat, maybe over Zoom, just about how the class is going. You know, I love a study group. I'm not going to lie. I love a study group. I think they're wonderful. Just something so you don't feel completely isolated. I think it'll be really easy with the new online learning model to feel like you're alone. And, you know, adding on to that, I really encourage you to stay involved in your Ukrainian student organizations, stay involved in your community, because it's a difficult time right now and we don't want to be isolated. We want to be stronger together, even if we're apart.
Well said. Irina or Marc, any other final comments?
I would definitely encourage more so incoming students that are going into their first year of university is to look out for those resources and different student groups to join, because especially this year, they don't have that social aspect that comes with first year of going around a club fest and looking at all of the options that there are at their university. So I would definitely encourage them to look at different online resources, whether it's specifically at their own university or even at some other universities across Canada, especially since so many of the events will be held online, and you always have the opportunity to meet a lot of people at your own university or across Canada, especially with the Ukrainian groups.
Well said. Marc, any final parting words for us?
Yeah, kind of building upon what Irina said, I think that it's really important to make sure that we always remember to ask for help, whether that's in an academic setting with your professor or with your peers, or within the Ukrainian community and like the student community on campus. Everybody is struggling at a time like this, and everybody's adapting, and everyone's going to have difficulty with something. And I think it is really important to keep in mind that you're not alone. There are people who want to help you, and that everyone will be getting through this together.
Well said. Very, very wise words of wisdom. So we want to wish you a great semester ahead, a year ahead. I start my first online class tomorrow morning. I've already tested the link with the prof to make sure that we can connect, and so wish me luck as well, and good luck to SUSK. I know that you'll be working with the student clubs to do great activities, and we'll follow you guys on social media and wait to hear more about the work that you're doing, and wish everyone well in terms of the new volunteer executive roles that you're taking on, and the challenge of innovating in these unique and interesting times, and of course hoping that things will return to some new normal sort of as soon as possible. But in the meantime, wanted to thank Devon, Irina, and Marc, as well as SUSK for helping us organize tonight's webinar. Thank you to the Canadian Red Cross and the Government of Canada for supporting our COVID series. Our next webinar is going to be on October the 7th. We're hoping to talk with groups of volunteers that are involved in faith-based institutions and churches to hear about the unique challenges that they've been having based on those institutions, again, all closing and now moving to an online format and now reopening slowly. Then we're going to have, oh, sorry, that's October 7th. September 30th, I totally forgot. September 30th, we're doing Ukrainian dance groups. And I've got 5 Ukrainian dance groups from Kelowna, Thunder Bay, Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Toronto that have all agreed to be panelists. So we're going to have a really good discussion about the impact of Ukrainian dance groups and I think some of the really interesting things they're doing in the year ahead. And then we'll do the community faith-based volunteer ones 2 weeks after that. So thank you to all of you. Have a good night. Best wishes and stay in touch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dobranoc.
Dobranoc.